Hello, this is Stephen Wallace, and this is my presentation on the calendar. Here is some information about me. The short version is after college and service in the Army, I got a PhD in linguistics from Cornell. I taught linguistics for several years. I then went to law school and worked for many years as a corporate lawyer. I'm now retired. This is what I look like. I have some questions. This year, 2024, is a leap year. Why do we have leap years, and where did this practice come from? More broadly, why do we have calendars, and where did calendars come from? If I signed an apartment lease or a car loan that specified a payment date of July the 1st, who says that that is a real date and that I actually owe money on that day? And what about the special observances that various people have who live around the world? Christmas, Hanukkah, Eid al-Fitr, Diwali, Chinese New Year, the sky and the seasons. For eons, people have keenly looked at the sky and observed the world around them. We obviously notice the sun and the moon, and as society has developed, a lot of people focused on these objects that move in the nighttime sky that we call planets. We have the change of seasons, particularly in the middle latitudes, and the development of agriculture. So, why do we have a calendar? One reason we do is agriculture. Starting around 10,000 years ago, people developed this practice and they needed a way of keeping track of the best time to plant various crops and when to harvest various crops. And then we have special observances based on ritual and religion. Here is Norman Rockwell's famous scene of American Thanksgiving, which is a combination of ritual and religion with a nod to agriculture. And it's one of many special observances. And how do we keep track of all these? Well, a calendar. Then we have the world of politics. I can't do a survey of every place around the world, but just thinking about the ancient Romans, they started out having kings who served in their office for a lifetime. But around 2,500 years ago, they developed a new system of government, which has been called the Republic, where they elect officials for limited terms. So if you elect someone to serve a term of office for 1 year, you need a way of keeping track when did that person take office and when does that person's office come to an end. So that's a calendar. And here's a photo of Dwight Eisenhower, who served as President of the United States for 2 terms, each one of 4 years. Another purpose for a calendar is the world of commerce, buying and selling, renting and leasing, borrowing and lending. People need to know when rent comes due, when interest payments are due, and many other aspects of the world of business. So that's another reason we need a calendar. Here I have a quotation from a noted scholar who wrote about calendars. And essentially, she says that a complex society needs a calendar to coordinate its activities. But she also says that people need a calendar to keep track of what she calls particular days. I mention this, or I cite this quotation for 2 reasons. First of all, because I think it encapsulates the nature of calendars, but also I want to note that Agnes Michaels was a professor of Latin at Bryn Mawr College. My wife, Christine Gilmartin Wallace, studied Latin at Bryn Mawr in fact, under Professor Michaels. We have several types of calendars that people have developed over the millennium. The first is a lunar calendar based on the phases of the moon. The photo there on the left is what's called the new moon. It's a sliver of light shown by the moon after it has just left its dark phase of several days. The photo on the right is the fully illuminated moon. We call that the full moon, and it occurs around 14 to 15 days after the new moon. These are both significant, as we will see. The second type of calendar is a solar calendar based on the sun. What people for many millennia thought was the movement of the sun around the earth, which we have known for several centuries is actually the movement of the earth around the sun. But anyway, this movement has been a source of the basis of some types of calendars. Finally, we come to a blended type of calendar called a lunisolar calendar, which basically starts out as a lunar calendar, but it has adjustments to make it synchronize with the solar year. We start with Mesopotamia, the land between the two rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates, in what is now Iraq, sometimes called the cradle of civilization, and seemingly the place where agriculture began around 10,000 years ago. And there are a number of places in this area that many people have heard of, like Ur and Sumer and Nineveh. But I want to focus on Babylon. Babylon flourished from around 3,900 to around 2,600 years ago, a long time. In its heyday, it was the largest city in the world with a population of maybe 200,000 people, which was absolutely huge at the time. Babylon made many contributions to civilization, including the calendar. And here are some scenes of what Babylon may have looked like. The Babylonians developed a calendar, not out of whole cloth, but on the basis of previous developments in that area. But it's probably the best known of calendars in that area back in those days. It was in use from around 3,800 years ago until around 2,300 years ago. It's a lunisolar calendar. Their year had 12 lunar months, each month having 29 or 30 days. Now, a lunar month is around 29 and a half days long from new moon to new moon, and people can't deal with half a day in a calendar. So they evened it out with some months having 29 days and some months having 30 days. So 12 lunar months is approximately 354 days, around 11 days shorter than the solar year. So they felt the need to reconcile the lunar year to the solar year. Why? Primarily because of agriculture, to keep track of the seasons, which really work on the basis of the solar year and the parts of the solar year. Agriculture really has nothing to do with the phases of the moon. So, how they did this was to add an extra month from time to time to reconcile the lunar year to the solar year. This process of adding a period of time to reconcile one calendric system to another is called intercalation. And this month is sometimes referred to in the literature as a leap month. The Babylonian day began at sunset. I think it's interesting to note here that is one of several ways that people around the world and through the course of history have decided that their day was going to start. In ancient Egypt, the day started at sunrise. In ancient Rome and China, the day started at midnight. And we have today that feature that we inherited from the Romans. In our culture, the day starts at midnight. Their month started with the appearance of the new moon. And starting from the new moon, they observed every seventh day in the lunar month as a special day. It was called both an evil day, where specified activities were prohibited, and also a holy day, where offerings were made to the gods. Now, one thing that's important to note here is, well, first of all, think about this. This calendar goes back to maybe 3,800 years ago. But you will see some features here that are similar to other calendars that we will look at, and not just the ones that we have time to look at very briefly, but a number of other calendars in Western Asia and the Mediterranean world. The history of how all these calendars are related to one another is complicated and to a great extent murky because of the lack of hard evidence, but there are just lots of tantalizing common features among some of these calendars. And it's an interesting subject that could be pursued separately. Well, we're going to leave Western Asia and move in those days and move some centuries forward and quite a ways to the west, to the central Mediterranean, to the city of Rome. Starting around 450 BC, that is around 2,500 years ago, the Romans developed a calendar. This was, as I said, during the Republican period. It underwent a number of changes. This calendar ended up being confusing and complicated and subject to manipulation for political and commercial purposes. So we meet Julius Caesar. He was a successful general who, starting in 49 BC, began to take control of the Roman government. He accomplished a lot of things, one of which was to reform the calendar, to regularize it in simple terms. He proposed this reformed calendar in 46 BC, and it took effect on January the 1st, 45 BC. To do this, he took advice from the Greek astronomer Sosigenes. This calendar, which after him is called the Julian calendar, is a solar calendar of 365 days with the insertion of an extra day every 4 years. This calendar was used generally in Europe and areas influenced by Europe for around 1600 years and is still in limited use today. I'll have something to say about that later. Well, the Julian calendar, solar calendar, had 12 months. They are listed here with their Latin names that the Romans used to call these months. The second column has the number of days that were established for each month. And the third column has an explanation of the origin of the names of the months. I think you will see some familiar aspects here over 2,050 years later. In any event, the first 6 months are named after various religious and ritual things. The second set of 6 months are numbered sequentially: 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th. Well, there's something odd about this. Let's look at the month of September. That word in Latin comes from the Latin word septem, meaning seven. Well, September is not the seventh month, it's the ninth month. It was even the ninth month in 45 BC. So, what happened? Well, originally the Romans celebrated New Year's Day on March the 1st. So, if New Year's Day is on March the 1st, September is the seventh month. At some point, maybe around 150 BC, they moved New Year's Day from March the 1st to January the 1st, but they did not change the names of the months. So that is the source of that anomaly. Here is a rhyme that 80 generations of children have learned. 30 days hath September, April, June, and November. All the rest have 31, excepting February alone, which hath 28 days clear and 29 in each leap year. This is the version from around 1555. All right, the days of the month in the Julian calendar. The Romans had a unique system here. They had 3 marker days in each month. The first day of the month they called the kalends, and then the next marker day was the nones. It was the 5th or the 7th day of the month, depending on the length of the month. And the third marker day, the ides of the month, was the 13th or the 15th day, depending on the length of the month. That word kalends may look familiar. It gave rise to the Latin word calendarium, which is the source of the English word calendar. A calendarium was a book used to keep track of interest payments on loans. What did I say earlier? In ancient Rome, interest was due on the first day of the month, rent was due on the first day of the month, and so forth. A practice which we still have today. Anyway, for us, keeping track of the days of the month is very straightforward. We have, for example, in March 1st, March 2nd, March 3rd, down through March 31st. But the Romans counted backwards and inclusively. For the Romans, March 31st, they called it the day before the kalends of April, the kalends of April being April the 1st. The day before that, we called March 30th. They called it the third day before the kalends of April because they counted inclusively. April 1st was the first day, March 31st was the second day, and March 30th was the third day. Well, anyway, you keep going back and you get to March 15th, the Ides of March, which is famous because on that day in 44 BC, Julius Caesar was assassinated. Well, the day before that, March 14th, is the day before the Ides of March, and so on and so forth. You move back to March 7th, the Nones of March. March 6th is the day before the Nones, and you keep counting backwards until you get to March 1st, which is the Kalends of March. Well, after a while, people gave up that system and moved to what we have today. Now I want to talk about the week. Unlike the day, the month, and the year, which have some connection with nature, the week has no basis in nature. The week is a purely artificial human construct. As I mentioned, the Babylonians observed a special day every 7 days. They didn't really think of this or in terms of a week, but it was just a special day. But this practice of observing a special day seems to have spread in Western Asia and the Eastern Mediterranean to become common by the start of the Christian era. Now we have the astrological week. A week of 7 days developed and spread, and people needed to give names to the days of the week. Some people gave very straightforward sequential names: first day, second day, third day, fourth day, and so forth. But other people took a different approach and came to name the days of the week after the seven moving celestial objects. The sun actually is not the sun that moves, the sun apparently moves, but the other six do move, the moon and the five planets visible to the naked eye. They didn't have telescopes in those days. So the planets they were dealing with were Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. They didn't think of the Earth as a planet. It was just the fixed center of the universe. This practice of the astrological week, or the week named after these seven celestial objects, may have developed in Egypt around 300 BC, and it spread to the Roman Empire in the early years of the Christian era, more or less concurrently with the development and spread of Christianity. Now, in Rome, they originally had a market cycle of 8 days. They didn't really think about this in terms of a week, but they had a market every 8 days. It was sort of like the ancestor of today's farmers markets. People would come in from the countryside and sell their produce and their handcrafts, but on a much bigger scale than today's farmers markets, which are kind of small and specialized. But the Romans didn't have Kroger and Costco and Target and Walmart, so they had these big markets. The Romans gradually adopted a week of 7 days, perhaps starting during the reign of Augustus Caesar. He was in office from 27 BC to 14 AD. Again, concurrently, before or concurrently with the development of Christianity. This 7 day week was made official in 321 AD by the Emperor Constantine, who was the first Christian emperor of the Roman Empire. He made the first day of the week, which the Romans called Dies Solis, meaning the day of the sun, a legal holiday. When the 7 day week became prevalent in the Roman Empire, well, they took over the practice of naming the days after these seven celestial bodies. So we have the day of the sun, the day of the moon, the day of Mars, the day of Mercury, the day of Jove, also known as Jupiter, the day of Venus, and the day of Saturn. It's interesting to see how the Roman names, well, as Latin developed into the modern Romance languages, it's interesting to see how the Latin names developed into modern terms. Here I have examples from French and Spanish. Put aside Sunday and Saturday and look at the names of the days from Monday through Friday. In French, these are based on variants of the Latin names that I've specified here. Latin had a certain flexible word order. So instead of dies lunae, the day of the moon, you could say lunae dies, meaning moon's day. So that sequence is the source of the names of the days in French: lundi, mardi, mercredi, jeudi, vendredi. In Spanish, they dropped the reference to the word day altogether. So the names of those days of the week are just the attribute: lunes, martes, miércoles, jueves, viernes. Now, Sunday, originally in Latin, Dies Solis, with the spread of Christianity in some parts of the Roman world, it came to be known as Dies Dominica, the Lord's Day. And so that is apparently the source of the French and Spanish names for Sunday, Dimanche and Domingo. Similarly, the name of Saturday comes from the word Sabbath, which the Christians took from the Jews. So you have French samedi and Spanish, very straightforward, sábado. Well, there's the Germanic world in Northern Europe. The Germanic peoples took various things from Southern Europe, from the Romans and their empire. And so they took the calendar and they named the 7 days of the week. They transposed the Roman Latin terms into terms familiar to them. So let's look at Old English, which the classic version of which was spoken around 1200 years ago. The first two names there are very straightforward: Sunanday and Monanday, Sunday and Monday. The third one, Tuesday, the Germanic god Tu was the god of war, equivalent to the Roman god Mars. And similarly, the Germanic god Woden was the Germanic equivalent to the Roman god Mercury. The next day, we have two variants. A thunderous day means thunder day, but a variant of that ended up being modern English Thursday, the day of Thor. Thor was the Germanic god of the sky, the god of thunder and lightning, equivalent to the Roman Jove or Jupiter. And Freya Day, the goddess Freya was the equivalent of the Roman goddess Venus. The Germanic peoples didn't have an equivalent to, or their own equivalent to Saturn, so they just call Saturday Saturnus Day. I have modern German here as another example that has a few differences. Modern German is, I guess you would call it, a cousin language to modern English. They go back to a common source, sort of like a grandparent. The first 2 days, Sonntag and Montag, are straightforward. The third day, Dienstag, this word "dien" apparently comes from an old Germanic word, thing, which meant council or assembly. So apparently, that day in older Germanic times was the day on which they had meetings. The next one, Mittwoch, is very straightforward. It means midweek. Then Donnerstag, the day of thunder, Freitag, and then Samstag. That seems to have come from an earlier Sabbatstag, the day of the Sabbath. In some parts of the German speaking world, that day is called Sonnabend, which means literally sun evening, meaning the evening of the sun, meaning the day before Sunday. Now, the weekend. We take the weekend for granted. We enjoy it. We look forward to it. But in fact, it's a recent innovation. The first attestation of this word in English is in 1879. In earlier times, after the advent of the Industrial Revolution, many people worked a full 6 day week in factories and mines and other places. But gradually during the Victorian era, in an attempt to make life a little better for the working people, they developed a practice of letting people go from work at 2 o'clock on Saturday afternoon. So they had an extended period of time there at the end of the week to enjoy their families and recreation and hobbies. This practice, at least in some ways, lasted quite a long time. I'll give you a couple of personal anecdotes. My father was a dentist. During the heyday of his practice in the 1950s, he had regular office hours Monday through Friday, but he also had office hours on Saturday mornings. He got home on Saturday around 1 or 1:30. And then in 1964, I started college at Rice University. We had regular classes Monday, Wednesday, Friday, an hour apiece, or actually 50 minutes to account for class changes. And we also had a similar schedule for Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. Yes, in fact, we went to class on Saturday mornings. Well, 2 years later, in 1966, they put an end to Saturday classes, and the Tuesday, Thursday classes ended up being an hour and a half or 80 minutes apiece. Around the world, I mean, we take the Saturday, Sunday weekend for granted, but some people, for religious and traditional reasons, have different weekends. In Israel, the official weekend is Friday and Saturday. In Saudi Arabia and Oman and some other nearby countries, the weekend is also Friday and Saturday. I mention Oman because around 25 years ago, I spent some time working there. And in those days, the weekend in Oman was Thursday and Friday. It was one of the hardest things to get used to, in fact, to have a different weekend. But they changed it to Friday, Saturday to coordinate with neighboring countries. Next door to Saudi Arabia and Oman are the United Arab Emirates, notably Dubai and Abu Dhabi. For the longest time, they had Friday, Saturday as their weekend, but they recently changed it to Saturday, Sunday to coordinate with the international business and financial markets. Now we come to the Gregorian calendar. As I noted, the Julian calendar, dating from 45 BC, it's based on a solar year of 365.25 days. But the actual solar year is slightly shorter. It's 365.2422 days. And that's a rounding to the fourth decimal place. So the Julian calendar gains one day around every 128 years. As a simple example, assume this is year zero. Wait 128 years. The Julian calendar will say, pick a day. It's August 19th. But in actual physical astronomical reality, it's not August 19th, it's only August 18th. So the Julian calendar is like an old fashioned mechanical clock or watch that runs fast. Now, over the centuries, this caused problems, especially calculating the date of Easter, which I'll talk about later. Well, Pope Gregory the 13th, who was in office in the 16th century, to deal with this situation, he convened a panel of experts. And in 1582, he promulgated a revision of the Julian calendar to fix its technical problems. And this came to be known after him as the Gregorian calendar, and it's become our calendar today. This is the familiar calendar that we all know. The Gregorian calendar adjusted leap year to get the calendar almost exactly in sync with astronomical reality. Now, remember, the Julian calendar specified that leap year, that is, inserting an extra day in February, was to occur every 4 years in years whose number was evenly divisible by 4. The Gregorian fix was to add some exceptions. So, it starts with the general rule. Each year whose number is evenly divisible by 4 is a leap year with an extra day inserted at the end of February. Except years whose numbers are evenly divisible by 100 are not leap years, except years whose numbers are evenly divisible by 400 are leap years. So, the year 1900 was not a leap year, but the year 2000 was a leap year, and so on and so forth. I have read that this will keep the calendar in sync with astronomical reality for some millennia. One source said this will work without adjustment for 4,000 years. Good enough for practical purposes. Now, the Catholic countries quickly adopted the Gregorian calendar. After all, if the Pope said do it, they did it. But the Protestant countries resisted. After all, if the Pope issued something out of the Vatican, it must be suspect. But they gradually came to realize in the Protestant countries that this change in the calendar was not really made as an assertion of papal authority or as a matter of Catholic dogma, but it had a basis in scientific reality. So they gradually adopted it. One of the laggards was Great Britain. There was a lot of anti Catholic sentiment in Great Britain, in spite of the lobbying efforts of noted people like Isaac Newton to get them to fix the calendar. Well, finally, in 1750, Parliament passed the Calendar Act that took effect from 1752. This act is really interesting to read. It's right there on the web, readily accessible. They made no reference to Pope Gregory, of course not. But in the preamble, the reasons they give for changing the calendar, first of all, they stated that the calendar has been found to be inaccurate. And secondly, they said the calendar that we're using here in Britain is not consistent with the calendar that many other countries are using. So, anyway, they adopted the Gregorian calendar, primarily the Gregorian formula for leap year. But because the Julian calendar, which they had been using theretofore, runs fast, at that point in 1750, it was 11 days ahead of solar reality. So, how did they fix that problem? They eliminated 11 days. So, people went to bed on Wednesday, September the 2nd, 1752. They got up the next day. Well, it was Thursday. Thursday comes after Wednesday. But it was not September the 3rd, it was September the 14th. Well, what happened to those 11 days? They were abolished by Act of Parliament. The Gregorian calendar is widely used in the world, at least for civic and commercial purposes. I have more to say about that later. The Julian calendar is still used for religious purposes by some Eastern Orthodox churches. For example, the Russian Orthodox Church still uses the Julian calendar for its religion. Yes, they celebrate Christmas on December 25th, but December 25th by the Julian calendar, which is January 7th by the Gregorian calendar. There's a 13-day difference. Remember, in 1750, there was an 11-day difference, but the Julian calendar keeps running fast, so now there's a 13-day difference. Now we come to a conundrum of the calendar, and remaining in Great Britain, we meet Arthur Gilbert and William S. Sullivan. Gilbert wrote words and Sullivan wrote music, and the team of them created a number of comic operettas, which were big hits back in the Victorian era, and they're still popular and performed today. One of their big hits, well, they were sort of like the Oscar and Hammerstein, or to roll this forward to very current terms, the Lin-Manuel Miranda of their day. One of their big hits was The Pirates of Penzance or The Slave of Duty, which was first performed in 1879. Well, it it has a lot of subplots, but in very simple terms, there was a conflict there between this band of pirates who were headed by a fellow known as the captain or the pirate king and the British establishment in the form of Major General Stanley. Well, One member of this band of pirates is a young man named Frederick. And as a younger man, he was indentured to this band of pirates. And Mabel is one of the daughters of Major General Stanley. And somehow they meet one another and they fall in love. Well, one of the subplots in all of this, it comes to a head where the band of pirates is going to leave port. And Frederick insists on going with the band of pirates, and Mabel would be left behind. So there's a lot of tension there between them. And a lot of this is based on the fact that Frederick's birthday was February 29th, leap day that occurs more or less once every 4 years. And his indenture specified that he was bound to serve the pirate king until his 21st birthday. So the conundrum is, if your birthday is on February 29th, when is your 21st birthday? So now I'm going to play a clip from this operetta. This is from a performance by the Vegas City Opera. And you can see Frederick, who insists, as he says, that stern duty calls, and Mabel, who insists that she's going to be left alone and desolate. Here's the clip.
All is prepared, your gallant crew await you. My Frederick in tears, it cannot be that Lionheart cares at the coming conflict.
No, Mabel, no. A terrible disclosure has just been made. Mabel, my dearly loved one, I bound myself to serve the pirate captain until I reached my 120th birthday.
But you are 21.
I've just discovered that I was born in leap year, and that birthday will not be reached by me till 1940.
Oh, horrible! Oh, catastrophe appalling!
And so farewell.
No, no! Oh, Frederick, hear me! Stay, Frederick, stay! They have no legal claim, no shadow of a shame will fall upon my name. Stay, Frederick, stay!
Nay, Mabel, nay. Tonight I quit these walls. The thought my soul appalls, but when stern duty calls, I must obey.
Stay, Frederick, stay!
Nay, Mabel, nay.
They have no claim,
But duty's name
no
will
shadow
my soul
of a
appalls,
shame
but
will
when stern
fall upon
duty
my name.
calls,
Stay, Frederick, stay!
I must obey.
Leave me not a pine alone and
1940 I of age shall be, I'll then return and claim you, I declare it.
It seems so long.
Swear that till then you will be true to me.
Oh. 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 Oh, but 1940 is so very
What?
long. And yes, I'll be strong. By all the Stanleys dead and gone, I swear it.
Here is love, and here is truth, and here is good for joyous laughter. He will be faithful to us soon, till we all live and live after. Oh, here is love, and here is truth.
Oh, here is love, and here is truth.
She will be faithful to us
She will be
soon,
faithful to
till
us
we are
soon.
wed, and even after.
Till we are wed.
And even after.
Yes, even after.
Oh, here is love, and here is truth, and here is good for joyous laughter. She will be faithful to us soon.
Till we are wed, and even after.
She will be faithful to us soon, till we are wed, and even after. Even after. Oh, here is love, and here is truth. Oh, here is love. Here is love.
Moving away from merry old England to the United States of America. The short version of this is the British Calendar Act of 1750 also applied to the British colonies, including those in North America. And when the colonies became independent, they took over a lot of British law, including the Calendar Act. So the bottom line is the Gregorian calendar, as adopted by the British Parliament in 1750, is the legal calendar here in the United States. Now, how do we account for the passage of years? Well, we have this system known as BC and AD. In 525 AD, which is an abbreviation for the Latin phrase Anno Domini, in the year of the Lord, a monk named Dionysius Exiguus, who lived in what is now Eastern Europe, purported to fix the date of Jesus' birth and to use that to mark the passage of years. Before that, the Romans had several means to mark the passage of years, including the officiates of consuls. The consul was an elected official. And so they would say that such and such an event happened during the consulate of so-and-so. No one knows how this monk came to his conclusion, but today's scholars put the date of Jesus' birth during the period of between 6 and 4 BC. And this monk's date to fix the passage of years became widespread in the 9th century. But the use of BC, before Christ, did not become common until much later. Today, especially in the academic world, AD has been replaced by CE, Common Era, and BC has been replaced by BCE, before the Common Era. Now we come to Christmas. Here's a scene of a family enjoying Christmas dinner. You see the Christmas tree in the background, all the lights outside, the candles there on the mantle, the garlands strung, everybody having a great time. Why Christmas is observed on December 25th is uncertain. One theory is that the early Christians fixed it on that date, which was when the ancient Romans celebrated Dies Natalis Solis Invicti, the birthday of the unconquered sun. That's sun, S-U-N. Well, this date, December 25th, was when the Romans observed the winter solstice. Now, the winter solstice in actual terms can occur on December 21st, 22nd, or 23rd. This is in the Northern Hemisphere. But they seem to have decided to wait for several days to have this observance to make sure that the sun was in fact going to come back. Well, okay, that's maybe the Roman background. The religious background could be the Jewish prophet Malachi, as recorded in that book in the Jewish scriptures, foresaw the coming of the Son of Righteousness, Son, S-U-N. So that was associated with Jesus Christ. So there was an association there between him and the Son. So maybe that's why Christmas is on December 25th. Another theory is that December 25th was chosen since it's 9 months after March 25th, the observance of the Annunciation. The Annunciation, as recorded by Luke the evangelist, was when the angel Gabriel announced to Mary that she would bear a child. Now, there may be a chicken and egg problem here. Is Christmas on December 25th because it's 9 months after March 25th? Or is the Annunciation celebrated on March 25th because it's 9 months before Christmas? We don't know. We come to Easter. Here's the Pope blessing the crowd in St. Peter's Square. For centuries, determining a date for Easter was a contentious subject because, unlike Christmas, Easter is what the church calls a movable feast. The Calendar Act of 1750 in Great Britain, implementing the Gregorian calendar, says the following about fixing the date of Easter. Quote, Easter Day is always the first Sunday after the full moon, which happens upon or next after the 21st day of March. Unquote. Now, the Calendar Act was not newly establishing this formula for Easter, but they were really reaffirming a formula that had been used for quite some time. Well, what's the significance of March the 21st? March the 21st is the surrogate or proxy date of the vernal equinox in the Northern Hemisphere. This can actually occur on March 19th, 20th, or 21st, but they picked March 21st to simplify the formula so it wouldn't, at least that part of it, wouldn't be floating around. Here are some fun facts about Easter. The earliest possible date of Easter is Sunday, March 22nd. This last happened in 1818. The full moon appeared on Saturday, March 21st. The next day, well, bingo, Sunday, March 22nd was Easter. This circumstance will not recur until 2285, a span of 467 years. The latest possible date of Easter is Sunday, April 25th. This last happened in 1943. The full moon appeared on Saturday, March 20th, a day too early, the day before March 21st. So you had to wait until the next full moon, which was Sunday, April 18th, and to the following Sunday, 7 days later, which was April 25th. This circumstance will not recur until 2038, a span of 95 years. The date of Easter is the basis for specifying related observances, such as Palm Sunday, the week before Easter, Good Friday, 2 days before Easter, Maundy Thursday, the day before Good Friday, Ash Wednesday, the start of Lent, which is 46 days before Easter, Shrove Tuesday, using the Anglican terminology, otherwise known as Mardi Gras, which is the day before Ash Wednesday. Easter Monday, the day after Easter, is a legal holiday in a number of places. Then there are Pentecost and Trinity Sundays. Pentecost comes from a Greek word meaning 50th. It's the seventh Sunday after Easter, and Trinity is the Sunday after Pentecost. Well, here they are in the streets of New Orleans celebrating Mardi Gras, always 47 days before Easter. I want to talk about some other calendars. One is the Jewish calendar. It's a lunisolar calendar. The year is 12 lunar months of 29 or 30 days each for a total of 354 days. They add an extra month every 2 or 3 years to synchronize the lunar year with the solar year. The month goes from new moon to new moon, and the day goes from sunset to sunset. The years are counted using Western or secular terminology, using the designation Anno Mundi, which in Latin means in the year of the world, abbreviated AM. The current year in the Jewish system is 5784, meaning it's the 5,784th year after the creation of the world. And it lasts from September 2023 to October 2024. They have a 7-day week, and the names of the days, the first 6 days are named numerically: first day, second day, third day, so forth through the sixth day. And the week ends with the seventh day, known as Shabbat, which is a day of rest with specific restrictions. The names of the month in the Jewish calendar are derived from the Babylonian names. The first month, in Hebrew, it's Nisan, Babylonian Nisanu. The ninth month, Hebrew Kislev, Babylonian Kislemu. This comes from a period called the Babylonian captivity, when the Judeans were held in Babylon for around 60 years, and all this happened over 2,500 years ago. It was the result of some wars, both when they were taken captive and a war ended their captivity. The Jews, like a lot, if not most peoples, have special observances. One is Passover. It's the 15th day of Nisan. Nisan, the first month of the year, which is in the spring. The 15th day of a lunar month is significant because it's approximately the time of the full moon. So that's Passover. Hanukkah is the 25th day of Kislev, the ninth month. Here's a photo of some people celebrating the Seder dinner at Passover. And the next photo, some people celebrating Hanukkah by lighting the candles of the menorah. The Islamic calendar is a strictly lunar calendar. It has 12 months of 29 or 30 days for a year of 354 days. The month is new moon to new moon, and the day is sunset to sunset. They have a week of 7 days. The first 5 days have numerical names, first day through fifth day. The sixth day is named Al Jum'ah, meaning the gathering. That's when they go to the mosque. And the seventh day is named As-Sabt, which means the rest. The names of the months have various traditional meanings. For example, the ninth month is Ramadan, which means burning heat. The years are counted from 622 AD, when Muhammad and followers moved from Mecca to Medina and founded the first Muslim community. The years are designated in sort of Western secular terms on the basis of what's called, from Latin, Anno Hagiri, meaning in the year of the Hijra. The Hijra was this move from Mecca to Medina, abbreviated AH. The current year is 1445, from July of 2023 to July of 2024. The Muslims also have a number of special observances. A couple of them are the New Year. It's the first day of the first month, Muharram. And then there is Eid al-Fitr, which is probably the most significant Muslim observance. It's the first day of the month of Shawwal, which is the 10th month of the year, the month right after Ramadan. It's a celebration of the end of the fasting month of Ramadan by breaking the fast on Eid al-Fitr. One feature of the Islamic calendar is because it is strictly a lunar calendar, the months and special days move earlier and earlier from the perspective of the Gregorian calendar. For example, in 2023, Ramadan began on March 23rd. In 2024, Ramadan began on March 12th. And next year in 2025, Ramadan will begin on March the 1st, and so forth. Here's a photo of the faithful worshiping at a mosque on a Friday. And the next photo, Eid al-Fitr, breaking the fast, people having a special meal. The Hindus. In India and some neighboring places like Nepal, they have around 30 variations of the Hindu calendar in active use. They use the Gregorian calendar for civic and commercial purposes, and the Muslim communities use the Islamic calendar for religious purposes. The Hindu calendars, there are some that are solar and some that are lunisolar. One of the most well known is called Surya Siddhanta, dating from around 1,000 years ago. It depends on computed positions of the sun and the moon, and it has both lunar and solar years, lunar and solar months, leap months, months divided into 30 units called tithis, months divided into a bright half from the new moon to the full moon, and a dark half from the full moon to the dark moon. The first month of the lunar year is Chaitra, and it starts with the new moon in March or April, depending on whether there's a leap month in that particular year. Around 1700 years ago, the Hindus adopted the 7-day week from the West, and they transferred the astrological names that had developed there to their terms. So they have the day of the sun, the day of the moon, the day of their equivalent of a Mars, and so on and so forth. It's not entirely clear to me from a lot of reading how all of these various things, the lunar system, the solar system, the 7-day week, all fit together. But in any event, they do have this as a basis for traditional observances and practices. Two special events for the Hindus, mostly based on lunar dates. One is called Holi. It's a celebration of colors, love, and spring. It occurs during March, the Hindu month of Palguna, the 15th day. Again, the 15th day of a lunar month is the time of the full moon. And this is the 12th lunar month of the year. And probably what's even more significant is the observance of Diwali, the celebration of light, which can occur in October or November. It's the end of the 7th month and the beginning of the 8th month of this Hindu calendar. So, more or less the time of the new moon. Here's a photo of Hindus celebrating Holi by releasing colored powder. Again, it's the celebration of color. The next photo, Diwali. Here's a cityscape all lit up in observance of the Festival of Lights. We move to China. Calendars in China have a long history with many varieties and changes. For practical purposes, the Chinese use the Gregorian calendar for civic and commercial use. This is in the People's Republic, in Taiwan, and the various international Chinese communities. They have a traditional lunisolar calendar to fix the dates of special observances, the most well known of which is the Chinese New Year, also known as the Lunar New Year or the Spring Festival, is generally starts on the second new moon after the winter solstice in the Northern Hemisphere, which is the first day of the new moon during the period from January 21st to February 21st. In 2024, this happened on February the 10th. Next year, it will happen on January the 29th. The celebrations last for 15 days. They're family gatherings, special food, and gifts, especially the red envelopes with money inside. There's also the Dragon Boat Festival, which is the fifth day, the fifth month of this traditional calendar. This can occur in late May or June. It commemorates a revered public figure from the past, and it features dragon boat races and special food. Here are people celebrating the Chinese New Year with the dragon, a very important symbol in Chinese culture. And the next photo, here's a dragon boat race. And one interesting feature of this race is if you look carefully, the crews of the boats are women. I have some comments relating to the standardization of time. The first is the time of day. We take this for granted. A lot of people these days don't have watches anymore, or, they don't have alarm clocks. They get time from their phone, or they set the phone to wake them up, or whatnot. Again, it's just something we take for granted. But where does the time of day come from? Well, it comes from an international agency based in Paris called the International Bureau of Weights and Measures. This agency was formed in 1875 by agreement of a number of countries, primarily to fix the official weight of the kilogram and the official length of the meter. Well, its scope expanded over time and it grew. 3 years after it was founded, the United States entered into the agreement and joined this organization. So the United States has been a member there for a long time. Well, using atomic clocks, they establish basically the official time in the world. This used to be known as Greenwich Mean Time, but now it's called Coordinated Universal Time. And this group then establishes the time and disseminates it around the world. In the United States, this is implemented by two agencies. One is the U.S. Naval Observatory, which is part of the Department of Defense, and the other is the National Institute of Standards and Technology, which is part of the Department of Commerce. And they do this, these two agencies jointly sponsor a website called time.gov. And it's really interesting to go to because they tell you down to the second what the coordinated universal time is. And they also tell you what the official US time is in different parts of the United States. We then have time zones. This is something we take for granted, but turn the clock back figuratively, 150 more years, the various towns and cities in this country each observed its own time, primarily based on what they thought was when noon occurred. At that point, they would set their watches and clocks at 12 noon. Well, this drove the railroads crazy, who were trying to fix timetables as the railroads spread across the continent. Finally, in 1918, Congress passed the Standard Time Act, which fixed time zones, and the map there shows what they are today, which is pretty close to what they were when first established in 1918. Well, we then come to the Gregorian calendar, which is our official calendar today, which is essentially the Julian calendar with some tweaks for leap year. This has become the de facto official calendar around the world, at least for civic and commercial purposes. Now, a cultural critic might say, well, this is due to European imperialism and colonialism, and well, maybe that's a factor. But as a fundamental matter, why has this calendar become so popular? Well, it's simple, it's straightforward, and it doesn't require periodic adjustment by some authority or other. It just moves forward automatically. Well, I say that, but I have a technical footnote. And this results from the fact that the Earth's rotation is gradually, very, very gradually slowing down, which means that the day is gradually, very gradually getting longer. Well, how do you account for that? Well, starting in 1972, this International Bureau of Weights and Measures started adding from time to time a second to the time of day. This came to be known as the leap second. So every several years, depending on their calculations with their atomic clocks and other observances, this is what they did. The last time it was done was in 2016. But this has been technically difficult to implement for various reasons. So they have decided that starting in 2035, they are no longer going to add these leap seconds. But in the interim, they're going to come up with another system to account for the slowing down of the rotation of the Earth. But this is the exception that proves the rule that the Gregorian calendar is simple and straightforward. And I won't say never requires any adjustments, but very rarely and under the radar requires adjustments. Here's a quote from a scholar about the nature of the calendar. Since all human activities occur in time, the existence of a social system necessitates some organization of time. These words of an eminent anthropologist suggest that calendars are a necessity for the existence of society. The calendar is far more than a functional utilitarian device. It contributes to a certain perception of reality and to socially shared worldviews. The calendar is often trivialized as a technical curiosity, but the calendar firmly belongs to the core of social history. Unquote. That's Sasha Stern. If you want to pursue some of these topics further, here are some selected references that you can consult. Here is how you can contact me if you have questions or comments or criticisms or other communications. Please do so. Here are some other recent works that I have presented like this if you're interested. And so I want to conclude by thanking you for joining me, and I wish you the best in trying to keep track of the events on your calendar.